Well, hello everyone. This is the start of a new podcast. We're doing a pilot of seeing what we can do in the Heart of Westmoreland mission community, and we're trying different things to the Heart of Westmoreland services. And we've got Dan and Kristy Pattimore here with me. I'm Andrew Sterling, and we're just going to have a bit of a conversation today to see what we can do with the podcasts and to have a conversation about what we could expect in the future from these things. So, hello, Dan and Kristy.
Hello.
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 It's nice to see you here on Zoom. We are experimenting in a big way here,
Yeah.
and it's always fun to do something new and a bit different. And I think I'm with two people who are probably like-minded on that area. So I'm going to ask Dan, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what your thoughts and expectations are from about what we're going to do with these podcasts?
Well, one of the issues we've got, I think, is that during severe lockdown or proper lockdown, we were doing everything online. And so services were being produced, the main one for a Sunday and a shorter one on Wednesday. And a lot of those were like high production values, took a lot of time to put into them, a lot of the editing and getting everything so it looked quite right and the lip sync was right and that kind of thing. That took an awful lot of effort. And then, of course, churches started to reopen. And the very people who were then leading services in live in the churches were the same people who've been doing all this editing and working in the background to get these things working. And there just isn't the time to do all that. So we're reducing the amount of time that's put into these services on a Sunday because we want to do the live services. But to augment that, we thought it'd be a good idea to have something like this, a conversation with different people around the mission community, get different people's perspectives on a number of topics in a way that is not labor intensive. So it really is just a conversation. And I think that's really important. And I think a bit more natural as well, because it's real. And if we make mistakes, mistakes are made, it'll all be recorded. It doesn't really matter because that's just like real life.
Absolutely. Great stuff. So basically you're slackers really, and we just want to stop doing as much work.
Yeah.
Kristy, would you agree with that way of looking at things?
I do, but I think I'd add something to it in that I think one of the things that we missed when we were just having the internet services, and we're even missing to an extent now, is the actual human interaction and seeing and talking to people and hearing from more than just the person leading the service. So there was a little bit of that going on with Zoom groups, and that's been brilliant. And different groups of people have seen each other. But even now, when we're in church on a Sunday, there's very little opportunity for interaction to hear from people other than the people leading. So I'd love to kind of spend a bit of time talking to Christians from all over the place and hear how they're doing and how they're getting on, and it's an opportunity for all of us to hear from them as well.
Yeah, and I think I've had very similar thoughts on it in the sense of I'm aware we've seen a lot of the same people, I guess, online, and as much as they're wonderful and we are all wonderful and no one can get enough of us,
Yes.
I imagine that's probably not the case. And we do have a lot of people around in this area who have such incredible stories and incredible life situations, which often kind of go unnoticed or just are kind of taken for granted, I guess. And I think one of the things I've noticed is as I've got to know people around here, and I've only been here 2 years, but you start to realise some of the incredible lives people have lived or are living, and some of the ways in people's faith is expressed in ways that are really quite new to me, or ways that have really challenged me, and ways that would, I think, have really nourished me while I've been here as well. And I think often that's the kind of the privilege, I guess, of being a minister in a church and things. You get to hear all sorts of different stories. But it means sometimes those stories are only heard by a minister, and rather than just the rest of the congregation. And we've got maybe lots of traditions where testimony becomes quite an important part of it, and that's something I would like to see maybe us go forward with through these podcasts, an ability to share with one another, not to kind of cast judgment on each other's stories, but just to listen and learn, and to see how that might help our experience of God and our way forward in our faith.
Yeah, because I think as well, people often don't realise that they have a story to share
Absolutely.
until they start sharing it.
Yeah.
So we're in the middle of our own lives, and we just think, oh, that's just what I do. That's just ordinary, and all the rest of it. And it isn't until someone else draws that out of us that we kind of think, oh,
Yeah.
okay, well maybe that's not quite so usual, or actually, I can see how God was at work in that particular situation, in a way that I hadn't noticed before. As particularly if you're an extrovert like me, and you kind of discover what you think by the time you get to the end of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's got a story, and I mean that's always been. I've always been reminded of that when being involved with the funeral. I have never done a funeral of anybody whose life has not been interesting in one way or another. You hear these stories, and you ask the questions, the sort of leading questions to find out a little bit more about the person, what they were like, what they liked and didn't like, the background, where they grew up, the schools they went to, all these sorts of things. And it's really, really interesting. Yeah. And then there are some of those who also describe their Christian journey as well, and how these things that they've experienced, how that's informed their faith, challenged their faith, their understanding, the highs, the lows, all sorts of things. It's really fascinating and really helpful, because you realise that, oh, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who struggled with this or has found that brilliant, or, and particularly I think at the moment when we are all so separated, it can feel like you are the only one.
Yeah.
And so to have that's a bit more just human connection of what's actually real in people's lives is really important. And if this can help that, excellent.
Yeah, I think that's something people often expect, isn't it? When they hear someone's story, they expect this perfect story, that everything's gone really well and God's done some incredible things in their lives, and you almost get a kind of a glossy image, photoshopped, that's going to make everything look great, and that's what we should aspire to almost as Christians, and we should look like that as a Christian. When in reality, the majority, if not all, of Christians' real lives is a lot more complicated, a lot more messy. There's a lot more doubt and uncertainty than sometimes we'd like to admit, and there's also lots of kind of darkness in the midst of all this kind of living in a way that's supposed to bring light. And it's I think helpful when we hear honest conversations and stories about how God is working in the midst of that darkness, and how God is working in the midst of the fears and the anxieties. And I think particularly right now, we're finding that darkness is entering into people's lives in a new and different way, and also there's a kind of commonality that the same situation's affecting all of us in vastly different ways. Some people in worse ways than others, and but there is a sense that being honest about it, and knowing that we can be honest, that's not a judgment upon us, but that's actually something that can often give us life and show the rest of us a way forward in how we live our lives in a way that is life-giving, good, and giving glory to God.
Yeah, there's a real danger of slipping into like a Hello magazine approach to Christianity, where everything's just perfect and no one's got any problems. It's all so lovely, isn't it? And when actually we know it's not like that, but for some reason we crave that it is like that, and we read this magazine which shows all these fake images, and then we judge ourselves in relation to what we actually know is fake. It's a very weird kind of dynamic that just sort of feeds itself, which isn't very helpful. And the authenticity thing is really important. I mean, just from my own personal experience, a little bit of testimony. Earlier this year, we went to New Wine Leaders conference, and they had the Arnott's, who run the Vineyard Church at Toronto Airport, which was the Toronto Blessing and all that kind of stuff was going on years ago. And a lot of question marks and judgment and all that kind of thing all around it. And was it right? And was it biblical? And was it evil? And all this kind of thing. And I went along, trying to have an open mind. And what I found really, really interesting was that they were very, very self-deprecating and said, we don't know what's going on, we don't understand it. And it surprised me as well that their ministry didn't really start until they were in their 50s. This was, and this is a judgment on me. My expectation was that they were in their 20s or 30s when all this started kicking off, and they were cutting edge and down with the kids and all this kind of stuff. But actually, they'd been through a lot of life, and John had really written himself off for ministry, but God worked through him and pulled him, and they do have a really, really positive ministry now. But the simple fact that there was that authenticity, that life, that reality, enabled me to hear something that otherwise, if it had all been slick, I'd have thought, I don't trust this. I just don't trust it. Because how many times have we seen the slick evangelical Christians put on a pedestal, and then suddenly you find out all the bad stuff? It all comes out. Whereas they were just sort of saying, well, we've had all the bad, here's all this bad stuff, and it's still kind of lurking around, and we do still struggle with stuff, but God seems to be doing something, and we're going along with that. So I do think that a reality and an authenticity is really important.
Yeah, I mean, and in some ways, you're kind of getting a little bit of that when you go onto Zoom and you find yourself in your own homes, and you realise that people have a house, and that it's not always tidy, and it's not always the way you expect it to be from this person, and there is a sense that we can make ourselves a little bit more vulnerable because of that, and I think it's a really helpful idea that when we're looking at these big leaders or people who are just living next door to us, that the same rule applies of that we want to be able to trust you. We want to be able to know that you are a human, and that you're not something else. There's a feeling, I think, for a lot of people that when and this is for friendships or going to church, that the people there aren't going to be some sort of monsters or got some crazy rituals, where actually we're all kind of normal. And that doesn't necessarily happen. And there's also the sense of when you go to church, you'll find out people are very much not normal, and they have their own quirks and their own ways of doing things, but in the end, that I think the word I'm looking for is that humanity, that we are people together, and that we'll come at life slightly different ways, but ultimately there's a sense, and how that feeling of being people together comes more apparent as we live a life that is supposed to mirror that of Christ in some way. And
I was going to say, it's quite interesting as well. I've just read an article in a Christian magazine. It was actually written by a friend of ours who we were at college with, and he's now a tutor. He's ordained, and he's a tutor in the St. Mellitus course that trains vicars down in London. And he's struggled for much of his life with depression, and some bad things happened to him when he was a child as well, which obviously has kind of affected him. And but he described the day he stood up in front of his students on the course and said, I'm a survivor of abuse, and I've struggled all my life with mental health issues. I'm currently taking Prozac or something like that, and I've had therapy, and I know that God has, my life has often been a struggle, but I know that God has been with me in it. He said that you could have heard a pin drop in the room, because it was the last thing they were expecting was for their tutor, who was on the leadership team at St. Mellitus, to be admitting that he struggles with mental health issues. But he said, he was basically saying, well, let's just proves the point that we just need to be more honest about this kind of thing, because a huge percentage of the population struggles with mental health issues, and yeah, so something about that authenticity. And he said, and the fact he was not just a visiting lecturer coming in, dropping the bomb and then leaving either. He was someone that they were going to see day in, day out, week in, week out. But he had a testimony of how his family have supported him, and how God is with him in his struggles, but he still struggles.
And it's helpful to hear people like that who are in those kind of positions where they've got influence, who are also kind of going through, difficulties, and have got own life situations that they're having to deal with, whether it's depression or whether it's something else. And to realize that, actually in the midst of the brokenness, there's a lot of light that can come, and people have got something to offer, That is a hugely amazing thing of what it means to be redeemed and to receive salvation. That we're not just left in the dust. We're given life, and in the midst of it all, we can give goodness and show the fruits of the Spirit, as it were, in so many different ways. So yeah, I think we've kind of got an idea of what we want to see, and I think a lot of it's about authenticity. We want to hear some good stories. We want to try and understand a little bit about the people of this area and the faith of this area, and how that can impact us in our different denominations, in our different communities. And we hope that this can be something that can be shared, I guess, with people in the church and outside of the church as well, so that we can hopefully explore faith together in a new way. Great. Well, thank you, Dan and Kristy, for this. This is as I say, this is a bit of a test. So we'll see if this works, if we can hear each other and have video. We might put it up. I don't know. So yeah, if anyone else is hearing this, I hope you enjoyed it. If you're not, then it's probably because it didn't work. So who knows what's going to happen in the future, hey? Right, take care.
Bye then. Okay. Bye, everyone.